Welcome back to another amazing episode of Crusty Car News, where it's especially slimy, greasy, and crusty today. We have 5 amazing news stories. First of all, Ford's latest news absolutely shocks the industry. The second story about how buyers absolutely refuse to buy these $100,000 trucks. The third story, Stellantis. Could they be going out of business? Where does it begin? The fourth story is about the car market, how it is absolutely screwed and decimated, and how customers are broke. The fifth story, the car market is in absolute turmoil. That's right, the EV mandates taking a backseat. Things are changing and changing fast. Sit back and enjoy the ride. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. Let's just start with the first story about how Ford absolutely shocks and devastates the car market with their big news. What's changing? Well, first of all, can they even compete in today's market?
Ford has had success in a lot of sales in the last 4 or 5 years with prices increasing. They've jacked up prices. F-Series vehicles have gone up in price outside of the reach of many buyers. Yeah, we see a lot of these inventory popping up. We have new inventory showing up, but a lot of these prices are now out of the reach of a lot of buyers. I mean, let's take a quick look here and understand what's going on. I mean, the manufacturers like Ford, GM, and Ram even say that they don't have huge margins in these vehicles, and having any major price increases like tariffs could absolutely devastate the economy. Definitely got to like all the decals on there. This one's an F-150. What do we have? Super Crew 3.5 liter V6, the carbonized gray metallic, beautiful truck. But this one's coming at an $80,750, and that's for an XLT. It's no wonder a lot of these vehicles aren't being bought anymore. But with that said, Ford's saying that they're losing money on the sales of every one of their F-150 Lightnings, and a big part of that has to do with the development, the research, and of course the acquisition of the materials that go into the batteries. Means that they have to apply higher prices to a lot of these vehicles, otherwise they're not staying in business. And Ford's saying that the Blue Oval brand, like you're seeing with the F-150s and the F-Series trucks like this, as well as the commercial brand, like the big vans, like we're looking at right there, are the very vehicles that are keeping Ford in business. A lot of people buy these vehicles for commercial purposes, for industry, for fleets, and these are the vehicles that are actually making Ford money. So are other fleet vehicles and other fleets, and all of this row of fleet vehicles are the actual vehicles that are generating revenue for Ford year over year. And even some of the Blue Oval vehicles are making some profits, but they're all feeding some of their profits over to pay for these electric chargers and these electric vehicles that are hitting the market, because Ford's saying that they're losing tens of thousands of dollars on the sale of every one of their electric vehicles. That's right, Ford is losing money building these vehicles. The Mustang Mach-E, like we see here, as well as the F-150 Lightning, now they're losing money, but they're trying to build those to have a place and a stake in the industry once the transition happens in 2030, 2035. But what that means is now they're losing money there. They have to make it up somewhere, and it's coming from the commercial and the Blue Oval divisions. But as well, if you've noticed lately, even the smaller vehicles like the Mavericks seem to be going subjected to some cost creep. We're finding vehicles that were originally supposed to be targeted in that $20,000 range. Now we're seeing them substantially more money. You can pay as much as $55,000 for Lariat trim of this. They're getting up there. They're creeping up in cost. They're almost at a place where there's no point. You can buy yourself an F-150 STX for even less money than a Lariat or fully loaded trim version of that, and that's not even a real truck. I mean, Ford prices have been creeping up year over year with vehicles like this Raptor, the Ford Raptor Bronco like this, absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I love the looks of this. Look at the fender flares on there, it absolutely looks wonderful. Beautiful painted parts, steel running guards. Of course, you have the hard top, and naturally you get the big spare full-size tire on the back. It's a gorgeous looking unit. But Ford got carried away in all their infinite wisdom during the shortages, and they were charging market adjustment fee to sell these because there weren't that many around, and they were making profits hand over fist, hand over fist. So people are asking, if they were making all these profits, jacking up, obviously Blue Oval and commercial division were compensating for the losses on EVs. They were jacking up with market adjustment fees on a lot of their popular models, the models that were hard to come by. Then now how do they get to a place where they believe they can't survive this 25% tariff? Well, these tariffs now allegedly were applied by the current administration and said, look, we're going to charge Canada and Mexico, two of the key locations that are building a lot of these domestic products. We're going to charge them a 25% tariff on all goods coming from those countries. In other words, that does two things, twofold. It absolutely crushes and devastates the competitive nature of the industry. So if you're applying those tariffs, anything that's coming from those countries, people are going to resist to buy. It's going to cost, of course, Ford, who outsources a lot of their products, are being built in other countries like Canada and Mexico. It's just ultimately going to cost them more money, and that is ultimately going to be transferred down to the consumer. Allegedly, the word has it, according to Farley, he's saying that about $60 billion is the deficit that we're going to experience in the industry. And he's one of the most outspoken of the big three. Of course, Ram, Stellantis has their own struggles. They're just trying to dig out of a hole, and they're kind of lying low right now. But GM, Mary Barra as well, is also saying that they've got a means and a way to sort of compensate and make some sort of concessions to absorb at least 30 to 40% of these tariffs. They're able to even compensate for some of it. But there's no doubt about it, these tariffs that are being applied to any vehicles coming from Canada and Mexico are likely going to have an impact. But it doesn't just begin and end with Ford and some of the products that they're building in these vehicles that you might see. It's all the parts that go inside. It's the parts that are outsourced or manufactured in other countries. Those being imported, even if the vehicle's being assembled partially in some American cities, the bottom line is a lot of these parts are coming from elsewhere, and there's still going to be tariffs applied there. I mean, we've heard the latest, aluminum and steel, a couple of the materials that are used largely in these vehicles. I mean, all these body panels here are made out of steel, right? And there's some aluminum in there and certainly lots of plastic. But with that, that's going to come at a cost increase too. And you think things were getting expensive already, but wait, because the mass majority of that material that's coming from Canada, i.e. the steel and aluminum, are being manufactured in Canadian factories. That's going to be applied. There's going to be a heavy tariff applied to those products too. So anything that comes, and they're the largest supplier to American-made vehicles, are Canadian materials coming from steel and aluminum. And that's going to have a direct impact on the price of anything that you buy. Metal, of course, particularly any of these vehicles that are using some materials like that, you're going to see more than just the base price go up. You're going to see anything that's using a lot of those materials that are also subject to some of these tariffs, that's going to have an impact. And as well, on top of it, the CEO, Farley, has also said that he's worried about all the warranty claims and the recalls because that's having a real toll on impact on their reputation. So vehicles, even though you've got a lot of these vehicles with the 1.5s, and some of these vehicles are subject to some of the recalls related to those fuel injectors. There's battery issues now related to some of their vehicles. Certainly recalls are the king and the name of the game here with Ford. And Farley says that that's going to be one of the major priority points and one of the sticking points in 2025. So now you're talking about spending extra money and focus on research, development, improving the materials, the build quality, and the service, as well as reduce the number of recalls. That's all going to come at additional costs. On top of it, these tariffs for raw materials like the steel and aluminum, as well as these vehicles that are being manufactured in Canadian plants or Mexican plants, means things are going to get expensive.
What do you all think? Do you think these mandates are absolutely going to help or hurt? Do you think these tariffs are going to help or hurt? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. The second story about how buyers finally refuse to buy these $100,000 trucks. It's getting out of hand.
It's $114,000. Maybe I'll just buy a Porsche 911, slap a decal on the side, and use that for business purposes. I can probably make more money doing that. Well, according to the sticker, $105,000, 450 right there. Why aren't trucks selling? I mean, look at this whole lot. We have a whole ton of F-150s here, and we have a lot more F-150s parked along this row here. We already know trucks like the F-150 Lightning right here aren't selling at all. People don't want them. And when they're especially priced at $95,000, definitely nobody's buying those types of vehicles. And customers are looking for value. In the cost of living crisis, people don't have the money. So they unfortunately are stuck trying to pay these high vehicle prices. And a lot of people are just electing not to do that. We approach $100,000. That's too much money in today's day and age with the cost of living crisis. Or here's a pretty little truck over here. How much is this little unit? Well, it has a beautiful new revised grille. Look at this. I love the new decal here by Ford, that black and white. That's a pretty unit. Look at the headlights. But I think all these extras are going to cost money. Yeah, it's revised. They have new style lights there, of course, different handles. I noticed the truck has leather interior. It's a gorgeous unit all the way around. This is an FX4 off-road. Again, more great decals. Nice details here. And how much is this unit? Wow, holy, what is this? Well, we're looking at an F-150 Platinum. Platinum gold. It's definitely worth that in its weight. Looks like maybe a Raptor right here. Oh, what a beautiful truck. Look, Ford in all of its glory. Beautiful, nice truck. It's pretty, but how much is this really worth? I mean, to you and I. Definitely we have these nice grills. Of course, there we have a Raptor. We say it's beautiful, has the flares on it. And how much is a Raptor? Brand new, how much? Any guesses? Well, right here. $111,000 right there, 110,700. Now I've literally seen it all. A half-ton Ford pickup truck for $111,000. What's going on? Why aren't people buying these trucks? Well, once we were in the heart of the shortages, we know back in 2021, there was only about 1.78 million units available. Yes, about 35 days supply. And the average trading value on a new car supply was approximately $40,566. Things have changed. Then in 22, things changed. Interest rates start to rise, but then inventory started hitting the lots again. And meanwhile, while Ford is down sales $500 million in the first quarter, the only thing that brought them out of the woodwork was the commercial vehicle sector, which was up. And as their full-size pickup trucks, their F-150s were down on overall sales. 7% to be exact, and 42% of their sales on the hybrid vehicles like the Maverick are literally the only vehicles that kept them out of hot water. Now, while car lots and truck lots are full on GMCs and Chevys, they had a great first quarter outpacing Ford for full-size sales. But year over year, both manufacturers have been losing sales to some competition, to smaller vehicles, to vehicles that were more cost effective. People were trading in their 1500 Sierras or their Ford F-150s for smaller vehicles like Toyota Priuses, Toyota Camrys, as an example. So vehicles filling up the lot like this, many more pickup trucks like this, and as well right over here, there's trucks, and more trucks. So not only is the cost of living crisis real, and the fact that people can't afford $100,000 trucks, repossessions are on the rise. I mean, there's no shortage of repos. We even have a fairly new vehicle, GMC Sierra AT4. Repossession. Vehicles like this. We have this long tank here, also repossessed. You could tell this one's been rode hard, put away wet, driven through the bush, dirty and muddy. Here's another repossession. This is classic example of the people generally, unfortunately, get themselves in a predicament, end up doing things like this, and this is an example of one of those vehicles. Here's another repo. Looks like they did a great joyride before they had to give it away. Another repossession here. Look, it's half missing. Here's another one. No shortages of repossessions because people can't make their payments on these expensive trucks. So and then in 2022, overall automotive inventory went up to numbers of about 1.32 million units available and approximately 43 days supply. The transaction prices were starting to rise. All of a sudden it went up to $46,000 and change. And a lot of the increase in prices were the fact that a lot of these OEMs weren't selling baseline base trim vehicles anymore. They were more inclined to sell vehicles like this. As you notice, we have a full-size pickup truck, GMC 6.2 liter V8, but it's a Denali. And everybody knows Denalis. They're the top of the litter, king of the hill. Those are the most expensive trucks, and those are the ones that they were making available in the lot. So naturally, you could no longer get yourself a cheap truck. You had to step into the next line. And it was this attempt for manufacturers to slowly creep up prices, simulate that there was shortages. But as we saw from 21 to 22, there was a rise in available inventory. Chips started to come online, and we start to see more new vehicles. It got to the point where they slowly edged prices bit by bit by bit by bit. And then they give you vehicles like this, no longer are a $30,000 vehicle like they should be, but instead, man, $45,000 for a small little SUV, SLT trim of this GMC, and it's clearly a Terrain. So clearly out the door price, by the time you throw on the extras, floor mats, tax, and out the door, you're paying well over 50 grand for one of these vehicles. These are small, almost like the Jeep Compass. Clearly not worth it, probably worth about 20 grand less. 2023, we saw a further increase in the amount of inventory, 1.98 million units, and then in 24, it rose again to 2.77 million units available on the lots. While days supply continued to rise, 56 days in 23, up to 72 days supply 2024. And even the average listing price crept up to yet even further heights here in 2024, indicating the higher priced vehicles are influencing the overall transaction costs. But while I'd love to have a vehicle like this, we have a full-size SUV right here. This is clearly a Denali, so we know this is loaded up. It's got all the big wheels and the bling and the latest technology. Gorgeous unit all the way around. I definitely love the style of this. Love the wheels. Definitely love the hearse-like handles and the stepping boards. This is a gorgeous unit, and it's a Denali. How much is this little unit? We look on the tag here, and we're looking at, $113,919. 114 grand for a full-size SUV. And so while month over month, GM's had a great first quarter of 2024, but as we've reflected back, when you look year over year, truck sales, full-size truck sales are down. People are losing the appetite for spending this kind of money. And sadly, if the last 4 years have taught us anything, it's that the manufacturers continue to rise the prices on every one of these vehicles. Clearly blaming it on supply chain challenges, blaming it on carbon taxes, blaming it on emissions, cost of doing business. A lot of it is honestly just bloat. And while there are some manufacturers, Toyota's promising to come out with a great new basic pickup truck for $12,000. Chevy's almost rumored to bring out something that's in that $8,000 to $12,000 to $15,000 range as well. And we know already the Maverick, the hybrid, is one of their best-selling trucks and is clearly dishing Ford out of the hole. But look at what we've got here. This is pretty much what GM's got. Their full size. It's got the Duramax with the Allison transmission, 6.6 liter turbo diesel here. Obviously with the Denali right here, HD, that means you're getting sunroof, leather, the whole 9 yards. This is the full meal deal. This is the Big Daddy King Pop here. Of course, we have the dually, the dual rear wheels here. And this literally will have every option known to Chevy's mankind. Pretty interesting bold grille on these vehicles. I like the style. As you can see, HD right here. I definitely like these intricate headlights. And naturally, there we are, these big bold mirrors. Beautiful. But there's the sticker on it, Sierra Denali 4-wheel drive crew cab. And there's a pile of options here. So it's fairly well loaded. Oh, $120,000. I mean, like, really, I love that truck. I sure love to have one around. I love driving diesel trucks. I like the way they feel. I love their power band. And any one of these full-size trucks would be a nice upgrade from my old 2003 Ram. But until I find prices that are a little bit more palatable, possibly waiting for interest rates to drop a little bit more, and we've been hearing about that all year, but customers aren't getting the interest rates that they need. We're holding steady. The banks, the reserves, Canada, US are saying we're constantly this next week, next month, next quarter, we're going to revisit this. We're going to guarantee drop rates soon, but we're not seeing it. It's not happening. Inflation's holding steady. People are still buying expensive cars and houses, as well as we're seeing food costs rising. Everything is going up. So does inflation continue to rise or at least stabilize? And as long as inflation is holding steady, interest charges aren't getting dropped anytime soon. The other trigger, of course, is unemployment rates. US, they've seen some significant gains and wins in employment rates. And even Canada, while they're down a little bit or a higher level of unemployment, it's definitely not enough to trigger a drop in interest rates anytime soon. So for a buyer to walk into the dealership, look at a gorgeous new GMC like this with this gorgeous top here. This is an Ultimate, as you'll notice, Duramax, Allison transmission, single rear axle, beautiful truck, absolutely amazing. But walk into the dealership and drop down your money for a $110,000 truck and then crunch the math on it, how much your monthly payments are going to be on a truck like this. Yes, $100,000, even if you put 10% down, you're still going to be stuck paying $1,500 or more a month of payments for that new truck. And that's maybe in a 5 or 6 year time frame. Right, there's an example of a $100,000 Ram pickup truck. This one's a Sport. Look, even the logo's on crooked. Look at that. It kind of goes up. Definitely the quality control is a factor here. And yeah, this has some aftermarket wheels on it. It's a beautiful looking rig. This one here has no sunroof, but it has leather interior in there. And this is the 1500 Hemi e-torque Ram, big boots, good looking truck, but it comes at a price, $110,000 for a rig like this. But what is the basic, cheapest truck that Ram will actually give you? And this will sort of give you your baseline, because all pickup trucks are highly priced these days. And looking online here, I literally found the cheapest pickup truck that they have on the lot. It's even marked down. It's a 2023, and here it is. It's a Ram, and clearly as basic gets. This, let me give you a quick demo and explain how much this is actually marked down. Here we have a long box, not a particularly good looking truck. This one here is the Ram 1500 Classic. We got steel wheels on there, plastic front bumpers, plastic front grille, and it's very basic, which is what a lot of people that's all they want, just to do basic work. You have a basic mirror, and of course plastic handles, plastic top on there. Of course, at least they give you this, but I look under here and I'm not lying. It looks like it feels like it needs a little trim. There's some ridge under there and it looks like it needs a molding or something. But we circle around to the back, basic plastic. Hey, you have the big horns there. Well, if you want basic, this is going to be basic for you, because even inside, it has a very basic layout. You've got plastic seats, plastic floors, and basically you don't have the big infotainment system. This is a very, very basic pickup truck all the way around. And so what does this unit go for? With the base engine V6, this actually has crank windows, plastic everything, as minimalist as you can possibly get. It was originally a 2023 marked at $50,000. Yes, it's now marked at 38 grand.
Yes, I know you can find some lower cost trucks. Very low trim level vehicles are starting to creep out of the woodwork, but there's still not a lot of selection. These car manufacturers clearly see tons of value in selling you a top trim level vehicle. Resist. Fix what you've got. Pick the best value. Look bang for buck. Ford, of course, some of their best values come in the STX as opposed to the Platinum. Sure, you like your options, your features, but you're gonna pay. The third story. Could this in fact be the beginning of the end for Stellantis? Are they going out of business? Well, why don't we just take this from the top up to 2,200 layoffs are imminent. On top of it, one of their newest, most affordable models that was getting a redesign is being put on hold. That's what people are looking for. People are looking for, or buyers are looking for, a cost-effective and affordable vehicle. And we know, unfortunately, in the last few years, Stellantis has been one of these manufacturers that felt like they could go upscale into more of a luxury car segment. But that backfired. And since then, their CEO is gone. Well, they've replaced the outgoing CEO, Tavares, with a whole new entourage of VPs. But since then, there's been a sort of a refocus, trying to get the brand back on its feet. Stellantis, the owner of Jeep, Dodge, Ram, and Chrysler. Yeah, the very brands that have traditionally had excessively high day supply. Yes, much higher, in some cases 2 to 3 times the industry average. A lot of their vehicles just haven't been selling. The Dodge Hornet, poor seller because, well, it's excessively priced. The Jeep Grand Cherokee, high price, they've gone upscale, and it wasn't uncommon to find a $100,000 Jeep Grand Cherokee. The Jeep Wagoneer as well. They've been trying to incentivize those for the last 3 or 4 or 5 months because they haven't been selling either.
Ram and Jeep just can't sell their vehicles. I mean, look at the lot. Look at all these trucks we have here. Look at all the trucks down there, as well as look at all these Jeeps.
Now they're excessively high priced, but clearly it feels like Stellantis has missed the mark. And now, unfortunately, because of a couple of big change in the tide, more struggles are faced against Stellantis. The Ram has been a model as well that has been highly incentivized, and we've seen a lot of efforts to try to knock down prices in the last quarter of 2024 just to get people to buy these vehicles.
$118,000?
And while they've put a little dent in sales, the ultimate response is by buyers is not a real productive one. I mean, Ram, now they've gone to their new Hurricane inline 6 turbo engine. A lot of people miss that 5.7 Hemi. So that's going to be a struggle and some major headwinds there. Of course, there's this refocus on the brand as a whole. Where's the price point? Who's buying these vehicles? A lot of the obsolete vehicles that they've had thus far.
There's no shortage of Jeeps. Look, even this, for example, we have a 4xe. That's a great looking unit. And obviously, it's a Wrangler Rubicon X 4xe. And wow, $86,000. $64,000 for that 4-door Sport S 4x4. Wow. $67,000.
Are losing their luster, and a lot of buyers aren't interested in that. Yes, the threats of tariffs from the incoming administration suggest that we're looking at seeing a 25% tariff applied to any vehicle imported to the US built outside of the US, for example, Canada and Mexico. Unfortunately for Stellantis, a lot of their products have been built in Canada, and the way it stands right now, a factory in Brampton, Ontario, has a roughly 2,200 workers that have actually been sitting on hiatus while they do a retooling. Retooling to change up some of their vehicles that they're looking at remanufacturing. Well, some of those vehicles, unfortunately, were the Jeep Compass. And the Compass, although it wasn't touted as being the most high quality vehicle, it certainly was a price point vehicle. And it was one of the lowest cost entry points for the Jeep brand.
And this might represent that price tag. Well, let's take a look here. Compass North 4x4, and we have a price tag of $41,590. But there's another one right over here. This one's a little bit more dialed in. You can see it's a little bit more dressed up. And this one here is a Compass Altitude 4x4, and this one is listed at $47,260. Wow, 50 grand plus extras plus taxes. You're out the door $55,000, $60,000 for this little rig. No wonder people aren't buying.
But sadly enough, the way it stands right now, this 25% tariff that's being suggested to be applied to the Canadian products or the factories that are building some of these vehicles looks to be a major stickler point. A lot of these workers are now sitting at home. While the retooling is going on, there alleges to be conversation that that brand and that particular model is going to be sitting on hiatus. not coming to the market anytime soon when customers need an affordable vehicle. If you've been thinking about buying a Jeep, that's probably one of your best options. The Renegade was canceled. That's nothing more than a Fiat Panda. But the Compass was one of those vehicles that was still relatively conventional, but now that's going on the back burner. Unfortunately, workers are at risk as well. And now where does that leave the rest of the brand? With highly priced vehicles that are in the wrong space. I mean, who typically buys Jeep, Ram, Dodge products, even Chrysler with their minivan? Well, typically the middle class, like you and I. The folks that, make $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year is kind of that sweet spot. But as it stands right now, somebody making 50 grand wouldn't even dream of buying a $110,000 Jeep. And so they need vehicles like these lower cost vehicle alternatives. I mean, we see even the likes of Mitsubishi have gotten rid of their lower cost vehicles, and a lot of brands seem to be getting rid of those entry points. Why? Because they see more profits in the top trim level vehicles. Ford, sure, you can get an STX F-150 for $45,000, but they're harder to find, they're harder to come by, and realistically, they're not heavily offered up. I mean, a lot of people walk into the dealership, and what they'll often find is Ford dealers, from my personal experiences, want to lean you into the other vehicles, XLTs, Lariats, because they know that they've got much more trim, they've got a lot more profit margin buried in there. But here we are, the Jeeps, built in Brampton, likely on hold. And these tariffs are going to take a real whooping to Stellantis. Now, what are they going to do? How are they going to get through this? More importantly, what are those 2,200 workers going to do for work? Because allegedly the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, is, promised to look at, promoting increased job opportunities, certainly look at improving the overall economy. But we haven't seen a lot of improvement with the cost of living crisis going on. Ontario, Toronto is one of the most expensive places in Canada to live. The cost of living is just out of this reach for many people in that very province. So these 2,200 workers that are now sitting at home or possibly looking for new jobs are in a very unfortunate position. That also puts Stellantis in a sticky spot that they can't bring this cost-effective vehicle to market. Now, ultimately, this sits on the heels of what Trump was suggesting is as long as these brands bring their product and their factories home and build them in U.S. soil, then all is good. But there's a huge expense in retooling, relocating, and of course that all takes time. And that time, quite often, is not what people have. Unfortunately, Stellantis has been on a downward spiral for many months, and actually some could argue for a couple of years now, and it just leaves the entire organization in a real tough spot. Yes, these tariffs look to be building and mounting, and they're going to cost a lot of these big three hugely. Of course, we're talking Stellantis, the Jeeps. They're going to look at closing factories. Ford is in trouble, as well as GM. They figure they have a bit of a plan, but it's going to hit every one of these big domestic manufacturers extremely hard. The fourth story is about how the car market is absolutely screwed. Yes, customers have been broke, squeezed to the limits. Every last dollar has been sapped out of our wallets. And a lot of that has been compliments of cost of living, inflation, and yes, car manufacturers.
Truck month, 0% financing on select 1,500 models. Yes, they keep pushing their products and they're selling, but for how much? Here, save over $18,500 on Ram 1,500 models and basically payments from $129 weekly. I like how they do that weekly thing. It kind of deceives you a little bit. $129 is more like $500-600, and that's barely getting in the door. Guaranteed. Good luck. I'd like to see them show me one of those vehicles for $500-600 a month. You're likely going to set yourself up with a car payment that looks to be $1,200-1,500, maybe even closer to $2,000 if you're getting one of those diesel pickup trucks. It's clearly too much money, and customers, buyers, are finally broken. Steel rims. Look at that basic exhaust tip on there. They don't even spray an aligner, and of course there's no rear slider. But these vehicles aren't that cheap, and the Super Duty here with the 7.3 in it is going for a massive $83,000. A gas job with rubber floors and plastic seats. Not a great deal, but that's what people are paying, and they can't afford it. They can't even afford to go to work sometimes because of the price of these work trucks are getting out of hand too. Here's a repossession. Here we have another repossession, not looked after all that well. Here's a little used Subaru, and this one is also a repossession. This Jeep Grand Cherokee, here's a repossession. As you can see, pretty much rode hard, put away wet, and as well we have a Ram, and clearly it's missing the bumper. Often repossessed vehicles are rarely looked after by the owner. Usually the writing's on the wall and the repo man starts knocking on their door. They don't care. They usually give up the ghost and don't even bother with the condition of the vehicle. And sadly, stories like this, as well as cases like this where you have fires, burning, dunnage, and obviously makeshift materials for a home. People hiding behind transformers and living in their RVs because they can't afford to live in a house and drive a car means there are clearly something wrong. Some experts are saying that car prices have actually dropped. In this last quarter, we've seen a 2.5% drop based on Cox Automotive. But in fact has actually stabilized and gone up if we look back a year ago. So we're seeing these ups and downs in the market. Also, people are saying in some spaces in the industry that affordability is starting to improve. But on the flip side is, you know what? I just went to McDonald's yesterday. I went and got myself a quarter pounder with cheese meal, and I got an extra burger on the side. That actually total cost me over $18. So when people talk about affordability, not even close. There's no way life is getting more affordable. The cost of living crisis is real. People having to live under bridges, live under scaffolding, in their vehicles parked on the side of the road, and the fact that we're seeing repossessions on an all-time high just are indications of the cost of living crisis. And the cost of living differential between what you earned 5 short years ago versus the cost of your home versus the cost of food, we were a much tighter differential, and now it's becoming the true have and have nots. And we're starting to see this. Why? We've seen food prices skyrocket 2, 3, 4 times what they were a few short years ago. We've even seen housing prices go up dramatically. We're seeing housing costs at least double or triple in the larger cities in Canada, Vancouver and Toronto, while every other city across North America, including the States, has continued to climb as well and escalate, separating the difference between those that have and those that don't. And everybody knows housing's gone up, food's gone up, but cars, and that's the essential way for people to get around, to get to the jobs that they pay for all these things. But the cost of vehicles has gone up 20, 30, 40, even 50%, and in some cases a lot more than it was even 5 short years ago. For example, well, right here is a Ram 3500 limited crew cab night edition vehicle, 4x4. Lots of different options. As you can see, you do have sunroof up in there, the bigger screen. This is a beautiful truck, but the price, $121,000. It's 121 grand. That is a significant amount of money. And car prices are continuing to rise. And sure, yeah, while we're seeing the average transaction price slightly drop, we're down to just under $49,000. These fluctuations are very little to do with reality and more to do with incentives that a lot of these dealers are offering up. And people are buying these vehicles at the end of the year, which we're seeing that lower dip, and that is more the indication as to what's going on. Oh, and here's another beauty right here. These are one of the higher cost vehicles you'll find in a lot of the Jeep products. And we're looking at a Rubicon here, and it's a 4xe, which means when you see the blue hooks there, that means it's electrified. Yes, it's a beautiful unit. Plug in there, lots of blue decals all over the place. 4 doors, you got the painted roof, of course, even the painted flares here. Beautiful vehicle, more blue hooks, and this oversized wheel on the back. Definitely love the looks of this vehicle around here. And as you can see, lots of great painted parts, and it's just a beautiful unit. But how much does this unit cost? Well, how about $85,655 there? $85,000. I can't believe it. That's getting out of hand. How about this Charger right here? Let's take a quick look. This doesn't look to be all that exciting. Pretty garden variety. It's certainly no Hellcat. $59,970 for this unit, and it's clearly one of the more average generic looking Chargers on the line. Here we have a Challenger over here in silver. Let's take a look at the sticker on that one, and it's a beautiful unit. Of course, no less, it is also $55,000, and this is the GT all-wheel drive plus. Cute vehicle, but they're charging a lot of money for a base model Dodge. Right here, the new Dodge Hornet, as you can see, GT, as you notice right there. And one of the problems is these vehicles are too expensive, and they're one of the worst selling vehicles that Dodge has right now. Lots of time on the lot, very difficult to sell, but here's a reason why. They're overpriced. I mean, here, Protezione, Cerchio. So, pardon my Italian, I don't speak Italian very well. This clearly shares the bones with the Alfa Romeo Tonale. So, what you're doing is essentially bringing a vehicle that has affiliations with Italy, transportation costs, all of that R&D or extra badging or changes to actually make this vehicle a little bit more expensive. What they really needed to do here was create a vehicle that was more cost effective, small SUV that people can get their hands on, can afford it, and enjoy it. But instead, they create something that has a little bit of a clout to it, and now, of course, you pay the price. And right here we have a whole row of vehicles, as you can see. I call this upside down alley because these are examples of vehicles that people bought back at the peak 2022, when we saw prices at their all-time highest, interest rates start to spike up, and we saw people that were paying way over sticker because they did not want to wait. There was this alleged shortage on chips and materials and vehicles, and people were often paying a lot more than MSRP on a lot of vehicles. It didn't matter if you were talking trucks, cars, SUVs, people were paying more, way more than they should have. And because people were often paying a lot more than they should, now after we skip out a year or two, all of a sudden we look at a scenario of naturally depreciation. Vehicles now start to dive back in, slot back into their natural depreciation curve. The problem is they all bought and they borrowed money at that top peak dollar, and now they're in a place where if they want to trade it in, sell it, even look at their sheer equity of that vehicle, they often have $25,000 to pay on a vehicle that's only worth $17,200 as example. And this is clearly what's happening right now, is people have overpaid. They're now in a negative equity situation. They have to keep paying or they're going to lose. Or if they decide they want to trade in for the next vehicle, they know they're going to lose their shirts and they're going to have to cover the difference or roll it in to the next and wind up absorbing a lot of those losses in the first place. Now, you just keep rolling it from one vehicle purchase to the next vehicle purchase, and the only way out now, unfortunately, is to pay out that dollar lump sum that you owe from that first transaction. Now, the only way to keep things affordable on the purchasing front is to buy something like this. This is a high mileage truck. We're looking at a Ram that has about 300,000 kilometers. Look at it. It's all rusted out. You have to buy a truck that's all rusted and it's ready to fall apart. Look underneath. The actual emergency brake there is all hanging loose. And clearly, this is a used and abused vehicle. You can actually see the cable hanging down below. So everything is worn out, clapped out, rusted out, and just the kind of vehicle about most average Joe can buy these days because they can't afford a proper, good, late model, quality, low mileage vehicle like this. I can't imagine how many people you're going to probably sell these vehicles to. What does the market look like? We hear the cost of living crisis is eating people alive, and yet we're seeing big inventory of vehicles like these Harley Davidsons piling up on lots. Who's buying these vehicles? Sure, they look great, but who can afford it? Now, it is such a sad state of affairs to see people actually looking to have to trade their vehicles up and lose even a pile more money. Of course, even like this, give your key back to your Ram, as you see right here, or people having to give back their nice shiny Mercedes right here, give the key back just because they don't want the payments anymore. And I truly do feel that what we're seeing in the market are truck sales dropping off, SUV sales dropping off, car sales dropping off. And I've shared that in previous videos, how we've seen this last quarter, they've actually declined by significant amounts, anywhere from 5 to 10% month over month, and as much as 20% year over year. If you're talking about one of these vehicles here, have literally gone down the tube by almost 20% year over year in sales, just because they're not selling, they're too expensive. And a lot of people either trade down, not trade up, get rid of their highly expensive vehicles, trucks and SUVs, luxury vehicles. They're having to wave bye-bye. And what we're seeing now is an absolute avalanche of negative equity situations where people have way more owing than the vehicle's worth. And when this all becomes exposed, the banks are going to feel the burn. They're going to take the hurt. People are going to take the burn. And of course, with interest rates holding, the sad part is interest rates aren't going to give buyers any relief anytime soon, because according to the reserves, Bank of Canada and US, they continue to say, as long as the triggers aren't met, for example, they have unemployment rate is below a certain threshold, as well as people still buy, and inflation rate maintains that level, they're not going to trigger and knock down any interest rates anytime soon.
So I know a lot of you are not necessarily broke, but many of you just say, it's not time to buy. These prices are clearly too high. And even if you have the money, why would you want to waste it? The fifth story, let's get into a good conversation about what's going on in this EV market. Yes, well, there's been some mandates being removed, of course, naturally, but this doesn't help the entire globe. And this push to EV just does not seem practical. Clearly in Europe, they're far ahead of the game, but even over there, they're recognizing that that's not the end-all be-all. We need to find a better solution. We thought things were on a track. Maybe a track that not all of us agreed with. Certainly going EVs is a market that was a very small niche market. There's a lot of resistance, but now we're seeing these mandates. Are they even achievable? Are they even able to make these mandates where it's full EV, zero emissions by the year 2030, 2035? I mean, we're hearing weird factors like Audi discontinuing the Q8 e-tron, Porsche, the Boxster and the Cayman essentially going ICE. Even the Macan now, they've said, you know what, we're going to now, instead of giving just pure EV, we're probably going to create something with an internal combustion engine, as an engine will slot right into that chassis. I mean, look around. Even Stellantis, they punted the old CEO, and now incoming with the new CEO, they're reading the writing on the wall. Consumers are not interested in buying electric vehicles, particularly more so in some countries than others. The customers aren't necessarily buying this. There's a lot of resistance. Even Volvo has basically said, look, we're going to continue on our journey to hybrid. We've seen lots of controversy around Toyota. Everybody's saying, well, why isn't Toyota getting on the wagon? Why isn't Toyota creating all these electric vehicles? We know Toyota's fully innovative. Why are they not generating these types of vehicles like every other mass-produced manufacturer is doing? Even the supercar brands are getting on board. Porsche recently canceled their ultimate hypercar, their 918 replacement car. Ferrari, well, allegedly there's rumors that they have a pure EV around the wings. Time will tell. But what we are seeing a lot more of, and not so much the EVs, because what we're seeing are brands like BYD threatening the very livelihood of a lot of these conventional manufacturers. Cheap Chinese-made electric vehicles. Even simple European vehicles like the Fiat 500e, which is where they transitioned to. Smaller, more economical electric vehicles is more of what the true die-hard electric vehicle buyers are looking for. In the meantime, those that aren't fully immersed in the idea of buying an electric vehicle would much rather drive an internal combustion vehicle. They'd much rather drive their V8 engine, their turbocharged V6s, their V10s, their V12s, you name it. Almost every manufacturer is starting to see the writing on the wall. BMW has even elected and said, you know what? No, we're going to pump the brakes on EVs, and actually the V8 engine is here to stay. You know what? Years ago, I bought myself a BMW with the V10. It was an M5 with the V10. A lot of people know it as the E60. A lot of great reviewers filmed it. Reviewers, for example, like Doug DeMuro, that car made its rounds everywhere. Top Gear reviewed it, and it was one of the most spectacular cars. They even likened it much to one of the best driving Ferraris of all time, the Ferrari F430. See, a lot of those cars delivered on something, and that V10 delivered on something that is going to be missed here in coming years. We experienced that ourselves, hence why we decided at that time, many years ago, to buy a V10 powered BMW M5. Now, a lot of people would imply or infer that it's one of the most unreliable vehicles, and there is a significant amount of truth to suggest that. The point is, people do not buy Corvettes with the V8s, Mustangs with the V8s, Lamborghinis with the V12s, Ferraris with the V12s, BMWs with the V8s turbos and the V10s. People aren't buying those cars for reliability reasons. They're buying them for the experience. And see, what a lot of people are starting to see, the writing on the wall, is all of those great cars are starting to go away. There's less and less of that. The V10 cars now in newer generations have changed to V8s. A lot of the great Ferraris now, the newest hypercar, the F80, most anticipated, it should have been a V12. Guess what? It's a V6 turbo hybrid. A lot of manufacturers are downsizing everything. Think about even Mercedes and the AMG. The wonderful C63S that everybody loved for that. Initially, it was a 6.2 liter V8 naturally aspirated. It was a glorious drivetrain. Then they downsized it to a twin turbo V8 that was 4 liters by displacement. Absolutely amazing car to drive. But out of the blue, with this attempt and this effort to transition to a market of very low emissions, they decided electively to come up with something that was a hybrid assisted turbocharged 4-cylinder 2-liter engine. Absolute madness. Loyalists wouldn't have it. People screamed, yelled out of there. Their sales were in the toilet. They could not sell one of those vehicles to save their lives. Mercedes was starting to feel the burn. And this entire shift for even companies like Mercedes to produce vehicles like that, to produce some of their EQ series of vehicles, EQE, EQS, EQB, are all very, very poorly selling vehicles. A lot of them are sitting on the lots 2, 3, 400 days supply, 600 days supply in some cases. Nobody wants those cars. And the few small niche group of buyers that are buying those find out the hard way that resale is absolutely decimating the electric vehicle or the EV market. So a lot of people are getting in, lease it for a year or two, try to sell it or try to trade it in, and they find the residual is next to nothing. They could lose as much as 40 or 50% of that value of some of those premium luxury EVs, lose it as much as almost half of it in a year to 2 years. It's devastating. We're seeing Teslas, even with the popularity and because they're the OGs in the market, that's the only thing that keeps them going. But we're seeing more so these days that even used Teslas are taking a real big hit in the used car market. Diesel vehicles have all been pretty much eliminated from the North American market, other than full-size trucks, which are exempt in other ways. A lot of these diesel vehicles are harder to sell. The emissions are essentially unattainable, like at least the target to zero emissions come 2030, 2035. The transition from going to vehicles that are high carbon output, like diesel engines, to something that's zero emissions by 2030 seemed like almost an insurmountable task. Then along came the C word, COVID, in 2030, and we saw some change, some shift. Conveniently at the tail end of this conversation of high emissions, transition to cleaner energies, transition away from lower emissions, of course, now comes Tesla, pushing hard. They couldn't keep their vehicles in stock. You couldn't find inventory anywhere. They just started hitting the radar and people were buying them up, snatching them up like candy. Of course, a lot of the earlier adopters got in 2021 and realized, hey, this is wonderful, this is great. And people were buying them. But it was the early adopters, and there was still a strong resistance by most buyers, and particularly the North American buyers, which started to see the writing on the wall. They also started to see what the limitations were. While there was many benefits of driving electric vehicles, some of which, of course, at the time were no road tax at the time, which of course coincidentally has been changing, and now they are getting billed, sending a bill for an annual bill in the mail. That's changed. People are also starting to realize once these vehicles start to hit the market, if there's a claimed range of 450 kilometers, in reality, get it out in the real world, variable throttle inputs, colder weather, hot weather, and all of a sudden that 450 kilometers became more like 275 kilometers. Range anxiety, panic, superchargers, and then the conversation about some of those vehicles being, or the superchargers being wrecked, ruined, not in disrepair. So you go through all the trouble to try to find a charger, you're on your last few kilometers, you go up there and the charger's out of service. A lot of people start to realize that. Then the expensive repairs, battery replacement, parts replacement. You know what, the early adopters loved it, but there was still a growing part of the market that just wasn't convinced that that was the solution. Along came some manufacturers all of a sudden, i.e. Toyota, that realized, wait a minute, we like doing hybrids because it satisfies some of the fuel efficiency, but we don't lose, there's no range anxiety to go with that. You know, reliability, smaller batteries, the costs aren't as much as going pure EV because we're using primarily ICE with a little bit of battery assist. And then they really amped up their game and went to what they call a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and we're seeing a growing popularity. Growing popularity of plug-in hybrids are going through the roof. A lot of these vehicles now, you know, you look around, Toyota almost virtually coined it. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. So you can go as much as 40 or 50 kilometers on a charge alone. So a lot of people are finding, wait a minute, okay, I'm actually getting almost all the benefits of some of these hybrids or these pure electric vehicles like Tesla, but no drawbacks. The extreme weather doesn't impact me. I can still start my car. I can still go to work in minus 30. If I'm doing my short daily commutes, I'm not running the ICE vehicle. Basically, I'm just running the electric motor, is buzzing me around. I need to take a trip to the grocery store and back. Maybe it's 20 kilometers and I didn't even start the engine. Little factoids like that are obvious becoming more selling features to a lot of buyers. They're seeing that plug-in hybrids, lower cost, get all those benefits of short trips, zero emissions, and of course, fuel savings, means that that seems to be a much better answer. A lot of the big manufacturers are getting into plug-in hybrids too. Even the likes of Stellantis are creating more plug-in vehicles. A lot of manufacturers are doing plug-in. Ferrari, supercars, McLarens are going plug-in hybrids. but also the mainstream. We're seeing plug-in hybrid vehicles everywhere. Almost every manufacturer is now starting to produce plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Because unlike a standard hybrid vehicle that sits there and regenerates, uses brakes and gas and throttle on, and it charges and discharges and charges and discharges, it does offer some benefit, but the additional equipment and complexity in those vehicles isn't necessarily worth the payoff, because you're not getting the level of free range and free run that you would get with a plug-in hybrid where you're running off of pure electric in some cases. It's very compelling to a lot of people now to start to see what plug-in hybrid has to offer. And so where does that leave the electric vehicle market? Well, clearly there's been a lot of resistance. We've seen a lot of pushback, and I talked about it last week, where we're actually seeing people being threatened, vandalized because of their vehicles, their electric vehicles. And specifically, the Cybertruck is one that really is making the radar these days. Mercedes is scaling back, Audi's scaling back. Every brand, particularly the luxury car segments, are scaling back because the popularity is in the tank. So where does that leave these brands? Well, there is still a market for electric vehicles, and there's a lot of buyers and lovers of the electric vehicle. And I think in some circumstances it makes sense. You know, if you live maybe in a small community or possibly in a downtown area, and maybe all your drives and you work to and from work and you work within a few miles of work each and every day, and you can just go to and from and charge every day, and you generally don't drive a lot, it makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is charging $120,000 for an electric vehicle. And a lot of people are starting to see that. That's why car manufacturers like BYD are knocking on the door and threatening every electric vehicle in North America, like Tesla, every European electric vehicle, for example, like Mercedes and BMW and Porsche, are all being threatened by the Chinese market. Manufacturers like Nissan are starting to fail, and there's a threat that they may be out of business in a year or so. A lot of it has to do with lack of innovation. And sure, while they create some ICE, some of their problem had to do with reliability, their CVT transmissions, their VCM engines. They're not necessarily the most reliable product these days, and they lack innovation. Sure, while they have the Leaf and then they have, another replacement EV, the point is we already know that there's a strong resistance and a sort of a mood shift towards plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and away from the EV segment. And more people are finding it okay and palpable to absorb buying and the added expense on buying a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle when they know the batteries are going to be cheaper to replace. They don't have the range anxiety. They still get the sound and the vibration of the engine, which is what a lot of people love, and the ability to wrench on a lot of their own cars still exists in a lot of these plug-in hybrid electric vehicles because you still have an internal combustion engine. But see, that's what's starting to happen now, where there seems to be this shift where a lot of these manufacturers were trying to get in too early, i.e. Volkswagen, now they're feeling the pain. We've already said VAG. We've seen Audi taking a title shift, trying to go up market with some of their premium models and basically say, you know what, start to pull back on some of their EVs. Porsche pulling back on EVs. They're seeing declined sales. In tanks, certain models, 40% decline. Have you heard the tanking sales on some of their hybrid, the Taycans? Absolutely brutal. The writing is on the wall. And so it's pretty clear that the 911 will be here for a while. And initially, at one point, there was even a conversation that vehicle may have been converted, but I think the conversation has pretty much been snuffed out since then. But what a lot of people enjoy is that rumbling engine behind their seat or in front of them. You like that big, powerful V8 in your pickup truck. You're not going to get that in an EV. And while there are some benefits of the EV, there's just some buyers that just want that strong, gnarly gas engine. Same thing with a supercar, an Italian supercar. That gives you that shake, that electrifying rattle behind you. You won't get that with a pure electric vehicle. That's why so many of these vehicle brands still continue building manufacturing these ICE vehicles. Have you ever wondered why the Lamborghini Aventador has transitioned to Revuelto, which is still using the same 6.5 liter V12? Sure, they've thrown a little electric assist. Same with Ferrari. They're still utilizing the twin turbo V8, but they're electrifying it with a little extra assist in the SF90. Now that market has taken a tank, and there's various reasons for that: overproduction, not specifically a numbered type of product line, and of course it's just that price point that's very exclusive and pricey. And it just is not helping the market. The fact that some new technology with hybrid in that supercar space is also not helping. But the point is, a lot of these manufacturers are realizing that these supercar and premium exclusive type vehicles were loved for a main reason, just like the M5. That engine, that sound, that noise you get from the exhaust. And so with a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, a lot of those attributes are still resolved, still saved. You don't lose, you don't give up on all of that. But you are winning in some aspects. You are potentially gaining some of the benefits of low emissions and low fuel costs. But where does this take us in the future? Because clearly, with BYD and some of these other electric car manufacturers, things are changing and changing quickly. I do personally see a further development of the plug-in hybrid space. I think that is truly where we're going to see a much bigger advancement. We're going to see more manufacturers going down that way. They're seeing the benefits and very few drawbacks. I do see more electric vehicles coming to market, but more of the lower cost versions. We know that, again, some of the Chinese-made brands are coming to market and coming in fast and furious. And there's only a matter of time before either we crap or get off the wagon. So the North American market, the Asian market, unless they're able to compete with that space, they're going to lose an entire massive market share. But I do believe something needs to change. And it's not just producing smaller, more cost-effective, very affordable electric vehicles for just the basic commuting. We need much more of that. But on top of that, we need to get back to more of those internal combustion vehicles that so many people love and that we've given up, like the AMG Mercedes. And I truly believe we will get there. But the government needs to get off the wagon and say, look, this isn't what people are looking for. And the adoption of pure EVs or going zero emissions is not going to happen by 30 or 35, maybe 2050. I spoke with people here in the industry, in the high voltage transmission distribution industry, that tell me our business development tells us we're not going to see anything till at least 2050. They kept pushing these dates out. No new infrastructure, nothing updated, because the writing's on the wall. The government's got to be ahead of it. Charge stations have to be ahead of it. And the absolute attitudes have to be ahead of it. But most buyers, like you and I, love the sound of that strong engine, that internal combustion engine. So where does that leave us? Well, a lot of this is in the hands of the government to make these decisions to eliminate the 0%, zero emissions cap, and transition to a place that's allowing more a partial look at the plug-in hybrids and make that make more sense. Because in many eyes of many buyers, the vast majority of the buyers out there today see as a plug-in hybrid or ICE that just makes more sense. Not to mention the ICEs cost extraordinarily high and people are done with high vehicle prices. It just doesn't make sense. And why should the production of an electric vehicle like the F-150 Lightning or the Mustang Mach-E be transferred down to somebody who just wants an internal combustion vehicle? It's just not there, people aren't having it, and people are getting upset. Ultimately, the transition to zero emissions should look more like a slow transition that looks like to a reduced emissions, but not at the sake and at the compromise of what the mass majority of the market is involved and interested in. I mean, think about some of the third world countries. That will never change. What are your thoughts? What do you think is the best solution, the best outcome for choice? Of course, keeping the environment clean. We all want clean breathing air for our kids and our grandkids. But what do you think is the best solution ultimately for the long term? And of course, with all of that said, I'm going to bring to you a new channel I have just started up, 6-Speed Reviews. We have a whole pile of great new car reviews, straight up my nitty-gritty style. Right there, check it out. You're gonna love that. Definitely going to enjoy that channel. Be sure to hit the subscribe button over there and give me a like. Shout out that you actually came over from this channel. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.